kids, you got to step up your good morning game again. Do you remember what we did last spring when we were inside? I would say, good morning, and then you would scream. Okay, maybe I shouldn't have encouraged them to scream. But I love it so much, and even I bet people online can hear that, even though they don't have a microphone. So hey, good morning online, good morning in person. Glad you all are with us. Appreciate you being here. And let's go ahead and start singing together. If you are able, please stand or rise with us as we sing. Come gather round the mystery of love in our broken history, where grace heals the fault lines in me. Time and time again, it welcomes me into a house for the hungry, a well for the thirsty, where all saints come together, shoulder to shoulder, a welcome for the traveler, new wine for the vineyard. In all things, God is able. Love has a bigger table. Sitting in the beggar, 'cause love doesn't need a stranger. Love calls them friend, welcomes them into a house for the hungry, a well for the thirsty, where all saints come together, shoulder to shoulder, a welcome for the traveler, new wine for the vineyard. In all things, God is able. Love has a bigger table. There's an empty seat waiting next to me. We gotta make some room for each other. Let my enemy be my family. Fill my cup till it's running over. There's an empty seat waiting next to me. We gotta make some room for each other. Let my enemy be my family. Fill my cup till it's running over. Hey, a house for the hungry, a well for the thirsty, where all saints come together, shoulder to shoulder, a welcome for the traveler, new wine for the vineyard. In all things, God is able. Love has a bigger table. You all sound beautiful this morning. You can have a seat.
Send it up. Good morning.
Good morning.
You are extra close today, kids, and I absolutely love it. My name's Jeremy. I'm the pastor here at the Grove Cottage Grove, and it is so good to be with you on this beautiful fall morning. Every Sunday is great. Being able to gather with you in this space, though, when the weather is this perfect outside and we can feel the breeze coming in, is fantastic. We are a brand new church that exists to grow goodness. And so we hope that your presence here in the room with us today, or if you're watching with us online, or if you're somehow interacting with us in all of the happenings throughout the week, that is somehow expanding your own circle of inclusion and helping to expand our circle of inclusion as well.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jordan. I'm one of the worship leaders here at The Grove. I'd like to bring your attention to the little handout that was given to you as you entered into the worship center. If you open it up, there's lots of great information in here. There's the New With Us box, tells you a little bit more about The Grove. At the bottom, there's options for giving so that we can keep this special thing here at The Grove going. And then also there's an insert as well. And you can fill this out, give us your information, and then on the back, there's some boxes for volunteer opportunities. So if there's certain things that you hear throughout the morning that you're interested in helping out with, you can do that as well. And then there's also information on our kids as well. And talking about kids, in the pews, there's a little registration form that looks like this. And on the back, it tells you a little bit more about Grove Kids. So in a little while, all of our kids are going to head on out to the Commons area. 4 years old to 5th grade is in Grove Kids. And then we also do have a fully staffed nursery out there that you're welcome to use throughout as well.
And then on the backhand side of your worship handout, we have our 3 announcements. These are the 3 things to know that we're really trying to key in on as we are in the month of September and kicking off this new season. We'll go into more detail about each of these things later, but if you want to know more information about them now, you can either scan that QR code or go to that link. But we are not here just to talk about logistics. The reason we gather, the reason we do this on a weekly basis is to make sure we're connecting with one another and connecting with God. That connection with one another is really important. And so one of the things that we do on a weekly basis is a time which we call Connection Point, where we give you the opportunity, we force you into the opportunity of talking to other people. Again, as we are a new church, it is incredibly important to have some of those forced interactions so that you're building meaningful relationships with one another. So in just a moment, we will ask you to stand up, find somebody next to you don't know or don't know very well. You can introduce yourself and then discuss this question. We do give you a question prompt to make things a little bit easier for you, perhaps. Today's question, it's a strange one. I'll give you that. Where do you sit at the kitchen table and why? If you have no idea how to answer that question, it means that you probably do not have a place where you regularly sit at the kitchen table. Someone before the service said, well, what if we have a circle table? Well, you could even have a spot at the circle table that you sit in regularly. Or you might have like a long rectangular table and you sit in this one spot every single time. Maybe it is because that's just where you've always sat. Or maybe there's someone in your family that has that spot and it's for a very specific purpose. I'll talk about some of that later. You might not have an answer to this whatsoever. That is completely fine too. So again, just a moment. Find somebody near you you don't know or don't know very well. Stand up, introduce yourself, and then discuss that question, and we'll reconvene in just a couple minutes.
Could you noodle for me? Noodle. Play something. Ding, 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 ding. Thank you. Where do you sit?
At the chair that's broken. We have a broken chair that sits lower, or that we replaced with just a random chair we have in our house, and it sits lower, and I'm the tallest one, so I gotta sit there.
Sit there
Yeah.
to save your family from
Yes.
danger.
Yes, and I still haven't fixed it, so it needs to be steel. It's steel, so it needs to be that's steel. Yeah. What about you?
Okay. I sit in a different spot every time.
Yeah.
I don't know why exactly. I know that there's one spot I can sit where I can see the outdoors. So if I'm like, I need to see green leaves, I'll sit there. But if like the front door is open and I want to be able to see people walking by, then I sit on the opposite side of the table.
Yeah.
No, Owen and Lucy usually sit at the same spot, and then Jacob and I switch around.
kids are sick, that's what we do. Like we go, like we just eat upstairs. Like we order pizza and eat upstairs by the TV.
Yeah, just snacks.
Where you can like sit in your bed and have like a tray.
Oh yeah, that like sits. Yeah, it's like a lap desk. Yep. Yep. We have one of those from Target. Yep. For sure.
Has Armstrong been good so far?
Yeah, just loving it. Both kids really thrive in school, and I do better when I have more time away from them. So it's been good for all of us. Although Jacob was gone all last week, so I had to like carry the team the first full week of school.
Oh man.
As soon as he got back, my body just was
Yeah.
like, okay, you're here now. I cannot care for a little while. Yeah, how's it been this week so far? Was he at Hillside? Or yeah, okay. There's a lot of kids.
Far away.
Yeah.
It's pretty close.
Okay, y'all can finish up your conversations. And this is the part of the service where the kids are invited. Kids, if you want to go to Grove Kids, you can make your way out, and we will sing you a little song to honor you on your way out. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. Every color, shape, and type, they are precious in His sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. Bye, kiddos. See you soon. All right, so we're in this crowded table series. We're talking about the ins and outs of inclusivity, which is obviously a big theme for us at this church, but what does that actually look like? We're taking a peek at a different aspect of that every week, expanding our circle of inclusion. And there is a local poet, author, performer that you may have heard of. His name is Joe Davis. He's amazing. He writes a lot of poetry around community. And I found one this week that I thought was very appropriate and inspiring. So we actually have invited Peyton here today. Peyton's one of our youth, and Peyton is going to read this poem, and then we will sing a song. So whenever you're ready, Peyton.
Gather by Joe Davis, a poem calling you to gather up what matters. Remember to gather yourselves, all the parts of you that have been forgotten and forsaken. Gather joy in your soul, gather wisdom in your spirit, gather peace in your mind. Gather love in your heart, gather healing in your body. Remember to gather ourselves, all the parts of us that have been forgotten and forsaken. Gather your people, for those who have been made invisible. Gather those who have been made unheard. Gather those who are weak and weary. Gather those who are bound and broken. Gather together, beyond want and need. Hands stretched and open, palms set free, to call and respond, to give and receive.
Come all you weary with your heavy loads, lay down your burdens, find rest for your souls. 'Cause my yoke is easy and my burden is kind. I'll take yours upon me and you can take mine. you weary, move through the earth. You've been spurned at fine restaurants and kicked out of church. I've got a couple of loaves, so sit down at my feet. Lend me your ears and we'll break bread and eat. Come all you weary, come gather round near me, find rest for your soul. Come all you weary, disabled or ashamed, I'll help you along, you can lay down your pain. We've got a long way to go, but we'll travel as friends. The light's growing bright, further up, further in. Come all you weary, come gather round near me. Oh, come all you weary, come gather round near me, find rest for your soul. Rest for your soul. Rest for your soul.
Well, if you've been around here at all for any length of time, you probably know, because I'm quite open about it, that I come from a fairly conservative Christian family. And often I have kind of leaned in and talked about what that has meant for us religiously, and how like our conservative theology has played out and continues to impact the way that I think about church and the way that I think about God. But conservative and Christian, but conservative was one of these terms that defined a whole lot of our family. It defined our politics, but it also defined like our household code. So I grew up in a family where there were very conservative, traditional gender roles when it came to the family and what happened in the house. So in a family with a dad and a mom and 3 boys, what that meant was there were 4 people in that house that did not have to do a whole lot in the house. And what it meant was like, I didn't learn how to do laundry or dishes until I went to college. College! You can imagine one person having to do all of the things around the house for everybody else. However, there were some select times when the rest of us were asked to do something in the house, and that was like a flag that, oh my goodness, something important is happening. Because we were being not only invited, but like told that this was part of our responsibility. One of those things, it didn't happen super often, but one of those things that happened semi-regularly, that was kind of like a flag to say, oh, there's something important going on, was when we were asked to go and get the leaf out to add to our kitchen table. Any of you grow up with a leaf for your kitchen table? If you're not familiar with a leaf, So a leaf for a kitchen table is like this addition that you get to add to a table to make it that much bigger. We have that table at the back that we have the basket on and the worship handouts. It's a round table, but it has leaves that can fold down so it actually gets smaller. Well, our kitchen table was a big circle, and the 5 of us, when we ate together, which was not super often, but when we ate together at the table, we sat around, squeezed in around that round kitchen table. But when people were coming, usually important people that we would actually sit at a table with, we had to add the leaf in. And apparently the table leaf gets the term from like a leaf is big and thin and has like some like a stem on it, some sort of attachment. That's where a table leaf gets the name, apparently. That was not the case with the leaf that we grew up with. It was big and it was heavy. And we had to go to the back of our parents' closet and we had to dig it out and then bring it out. And our table, if you can see it, was on this like geared track where it would pull apart, and then we had to bring in the big leaf. We actually had 2 leaves. That's how we knew there was something really important going on when we brought out both of them. And we had to lay it in there, but it didn't go in perfectly, and we had to like fiddle around with it a bit so it would sit on those tracks, and then it could lock underneath. The other thing to know about my house growing up is we didn't have a dining room. We had like the kitchen, and then there was a dining area just next to the kitchen, but it wasn't a big dining room, which worked out fine when it was just the 5 of us and that round little table. But when we put the leaves in, it got quite snug in there and a little bit uncomfortable. And as the youngest in a family of 5, guess who had to go to the most uncomfortable seat? Where I had to like squeeze into the back. But it was like part of the deal, right? It was part of the expectation when you have important people, when you are extending your table to other people, when you're inviting other people to be a part of this thing that you're doing, there's going to be a little bit of discomfort that is expected that comes along with that. So last week, we kicked off a series that we're going to be going throughout this fall, which we were calling Crowded Table. And throughout this series, we are looking at these stories in the Gospel according to Luke, one of the 4 biographies about the life of Jesus. These are stories that are specifically happening around tables, around meals. And the reason we're focusing on that is because this idea of table fellowship in the ancient world was really important. You only had meals with people that you were okay with, like aligning yourselves with. You would only have a meal with someone that you really had a lot of agreement on. And so it could be a very contentious type of thing when you were willing to gather for meals with people. Well, when it comes to Luke's biography about the life of Jesus, a large chunk of the stories about Jesus and the teachings that Jesus gives happen around tables. It's like he throws that out there to create some anxiety within the people who are reading and say, this is something you need to pay attention to, even and especially because it's contentious. We saw that last week when we had this story of Jesus going and having a meal with tax collectors. And then we see it again this week when he goes and has a meal with Pharisees, who were some religious leaders at the time. And so today's story comes from Luke chapter 14, 1 through 14. It's a little bit long, but hopefully you can hang with me. It'll be up here on the screen behind me. Now, one Sabbath, when Jesus went to dine at the house of a leader of the Pharisees, they were watching him closely. There, right in front of him, was a man suffering from dropsy. So Jesus asked the experts in religious law and the Pharisees, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? But they remained silent. So Jesus took hold of the man, healed him, and sent him away. Then he said to them, which of you, if you have a son or an ox that has fallen into a well on a Sabbath day, will not immediately pull him out? But they could not reply to this. Then, when Jesus noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. He said to them, when you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, because a person more distinguished than you may have been invited by your host. So the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, 'Give this man your place.' Then, ashamed, you will begin to move to the least important place. But when you are invited, go and take the least important place, so that when your host approaches, he will say to you, 'Friend, move up here to a better place.' Then you will be honored in the presence of all who share the meal with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted." He said also to the man who had invited him, "When you host a dinner or a banquet, don't invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, so you can be invited by them in return and get repaid. But when you host an elaborate meal, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Then you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." It's a long passage, and it almost feels like there's three completely separate stories that are happening here. But actually, they're like three pieces of a single story of once upon a time, Jesus goes to dinner. And this is a story that has like three different acts that's also part of a larger cluster of stories that are doing something here. So Luke's biography starts with the first 9 chapters. Jesus is kind of bumming around his hometown. He's doing his teaching and preaching and healing thing, but it's just within the confines of like his hometown and the surrounding areas. And then after that, by chapter 10 of Luke, there's a pivot that happens. There's like a physical pivot where Jesus has been bumming around in his hometown, and then he pivots and he starts heading towards the city of Jerusalem, where things are really going to go down. So it is a pivot not only in his physical presence, where he's going to be going now. There's also a pivot in he's now going to be heading towards this sacrificial death. There's also, however, a pivot in his teaching as he moves towards this is what a sacrificial life is supposed to look like. And then by chapter 13, our story is in chapter 14, but in chapter 13 and chapter 14, this is a section that is known as kingdom reversals. So as someone was trying to expect what a new king of Israel was supposed to look like, what life under the reign of God was supposed to look like, they might have these expectations. And these are stories and these are teachings in which Jesus is like, this is what you were expecting would happen. This is what you were expecting a king would be like and what things would be like under the rule of God. This is actually what it is going to be like. So the story that we talked through today begins with Jesus on his way to this Pharisee's house for a meal, and he runs across this person. Well, the other thing to know is this is happening on a Sabbath. We're told that this is on the Sabbath day. The Sabbath was and continues to be the day of rest for the Jewish people. It's modeled after the first chapter of the Bible, the creation story. God creates for the first 6 days, and then on the 7th day, God rests, and it's the expectations that God's people are going to do the same. You might spend 6 days doing all sorts of stuff, but it's on the 7th day that you will rest. And so a traditional Sabbath lasts from Friday evening, Friday at sundown, until Saturday at sundown. And this is supposed to be a day of rest where you do not work. Well, what is work? How do you define work? Not everybody could agree about what a definition of work would be, what gets included as work and what doesn't get included as work. And there was some contention around this as well. Some people were really generous with what they would consider work, and then there were other people, like the Pharisees, who were a little bit more conservative, a little bit more strict even in their definition of work. We've talked about the Pharisees the last couple weeks, and one of the things I've said about the Pharisees is these were very considerate, very, in some ways, strict religious people who tried to follow the law, dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's, taking it very seriously, which can be a really good thing until the messiness of the world gets in the way. And so when it comes to like what work is considered, just a couple examples that we see in this story is you could only walk a certain distance. Once you walked over that number of steps, that was considered work. So you were only confined to a certain number of places, a certain distance that you could go on a Sabbath. And something like healing, which didn't happen very often, to be honest, that would also be considered work. So here Jesus is. He's on his way to these Pharisees' house, these people who had these very strict rules around what you could and could not do on a Sabbath day. And when he's on his way there, he meets a man who has what's called dropsy. I had to look up dropsy this week. Dropsy is another word for anemia. So it's like a swelling that happens in your body, often in your extremities. And usually anemia is one of those things that it's a condition, but it's often like a symptom of something deeper and more serious going on in the body. And so Jesus runs across this person, and the expectation for him, especially with where he was going, was that he would just continue on. The expectation is that this is a Sabbath day. He's not going to heal him because he's not going to work. The expectation also would have been, this is a guy who is impure. He is not going to impurify himself by healing him and then go to a dinner where he's expected to be pure and righteous. And yet, Jesus stops. He makes room for this man, and he turns to those who are following and says, are we supposed to work on the Sabbath? You know, if we're being honest, we're not supposed to work on the Sabbath. And if I do this thing, this is probably going to be considered work, and I'm probably going to be breaking the law. But love is more important than the law. And so I'm going to do this thing because why would I not do this thing? Why would I not invite this person in and show them love, even and especially when they found themselves in this position, even and especially when it was on a day like the Sabbath? Great way to kick it off really well with your host before you even get to dinner. So then he makes it to dinner, and he walks in, and Jesus is just kind of taking it in and watching as all of the other guests are fighting over the best positions at the table. And once again, the dinner hasn't even started, and he starts going, no. You're doing this all wrong. You're doing this all wrong. This is not about getting the best positions. This is not a meal which is of service to you. Guess what? There's always going to be people who are more important than you. There's always going to be people who are more important than you. And if you go take those positions of importance, you're going to get kicked out of those seats, and I'm going to find it funny, but you're not. But instead, what you ought to do is you ought to put yourself in a position of service. This meal, this gathering, us inviting people in, us gathering around a table together, it's not about you, it's about the collective, it's about your willingness and opportunity to serve. And guess what? As a part of you taking a step back and taking on a position of service, you are going to get blessed in that as a result. Then finally, he turns to the host, who again is one of the leaders of the Pharisees, and he says to the leader of the Pharisees, the next time you have a dinner, you should not do what you just did. You should not invite these types of people who are just going to put themselves first. What you ought to do is you ought to prioritize the right type of people. The people like the man that we just saw out on the road that was not invited in, that I took the time to spend time with, to acknowledge, to love, and to heal. The next time you do this meal is not about you. It's not about what you can get out of it, but what you can give as a result. There's an interesting detail at the very end of his address to the host of the meal. And just really quickly, I just want to go back to it. He says, but when you host an elaborate meal, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, then you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. Another thing to know about the Pharisees that set them apart from other people is the majority of people, even Jewish people at this time, did not believe in an afterlife. Their job was to be faithful people in the here and now, and the benefit was somehow from being faithful people in the here and now. But the Pharisees were among these people, and Jesus was among these people, who believed that this is not it, that there is something after this, and somehow living well, living righteously now, had an impact on eternity. And so Jesus tells this person who believes in that and says, listen, if you invite these types of people that I prioritize, if you set aside your own blessings so that you can bless them, you are actually in the process of that going to find blessing for yourself too. As a church and as individual followers of Jesus, we want to grow this thing, right? We want to invite more people into the same type of experience that we have. And yet, it's not just simply about growing. It's not especially about us. It's not about just our own benefit. We're not doing this. We don't want to do this for ourselves. It is that we want others to have this same type of transforming experience that we have had. We want others to find a place of belonging, a place of comfort, a place of healing, a place of hope, a place of inclusion. And so when we do things, it is with a service mindset saying, this is not about us, it is what we are able to provide and share with other people. And the surprising thing is that as we do that, guess what? Somehow we're going to be blessed by it as well. We're going to be blessed by those people that we are willing to invite in, that we are willing to extend the table for, rather than us just trying to focus on ourselves. When we pray, the prayer is not just about us. We are praying for other people, and yet somehow in the process of praying, we're convinced that we are being transformed as well. When we gather on Sundays, hopefully you're coming and you're getting something out of it for yourself. But we gather for other people as well, to make space, to create a critical mass for other people to feel welcome and belong. And hopefully in your presence, alongside other people, you are experiencing transformation because of them too. When we give, a gift is something literally that is outside of us for someone else. When we are willing to give, it is for other people. And yet we are convinced that that generosity does something to us as well. When we serve, we're using our gifts and talents and passions to impact other people, but somehow we are convinced that that's making us become more full in our identity too. And when we witness, when we share our story with other people, when we share our faith with other people, when we share our experience of church with other people, it is not about us. It is about inviting them into some sort of shared experience that we have had. And in the process, it helps us. We're convinced that it helps us to better understand the grace that's already at work in us as well. So, with all of that in mind, may we be people who dig in the back of our closets to bring out that leaf and add it to our table to invite as many people in as possible, no matter how squeezed and uncomfortable it might make us at times. May we do so expecting nothing out of it in return, and yet being surprised by the blessing that we receive as well. May that be so.
We all rise and join us in singing. All that divides us, tear it down. Where there is hatred, may peace abound. In every temple, may we be filled with love so wonderful, so divine, love so wonderful, so divine. Beyond our borders, beyond our creeds, to love our neighbors, the least of these. Where there is violence, Let mercy overflow with love so wonderful, so divine. Love so wonderful, so divine. I still believe love is the answer. Can we see heaven all around? I still believe love is the answer. Can we see heaven all around? I still
Believe love is the answer. Can we see heaven all around? I still believe love is the answer. Can we see heaven all around?
I pledge allegiance to hope and peace. You are the stranger who welcomes me. Transcend our systems, transcend our fears. Love is immortal, love is all we need. Love is immortal, love is all we need. Love so wonderful, so divine. Love so wonderful, so divine. Love so wonderful, so divine. Love so wonderful, so divine.
I'm actually going to ask you to take a seat for these announcements so that I don't make you stand for extra long, okay? So at the back of your worship handouts, we have the 3 things to know. I want to make sure that I hit a lot of these details. And so the 3 things that we're really wanting to focus in on in this season over the next month or so. Number 1 is our Crowded Table Stewardship Campaign. So in addition to our series being called Crowded Table, our fall stewardship campaign is also being called Crowded Table. As a church, we come to the congregation just 3 times a year asking for money outside of like weekly giving, okay? The one is in the spring. We do a Being the Hope campaign, which is about raising money where we can support ministries outside of the local church. The second one, which we did this summer, this June, was the property improvement campaign to raise money outside of our normal operating budget for specific projects. Hey, by the way, this was the result of it. I don't know if you've noticed, but you can read the screen now. 2 times the number of lumens on this thing. So thank you for all of you that contributed to that. But that's just 2 times. So those are 2 times that we ask for money. The only other time, the third time, is that in the fall, we do what's called our stewardship campaign, which is asking for pledges for the coming year in giving. It helps us to be able to plan budgets for the coming year, and we think that it also allows you to think through your own budget and say, what is it that I can help to contribute to the church? In the midst of this series, too, the way that I want you to think about it is our operating budget, our stewardship campaign, allows us the capacity to be able to further extend our table. Your generous giving, your generosity allows us to continue to do the things that you love and to allow us to create the space for all of the people that we hope are arriving next. So we're kicking off that campaign. You're going to be hearing a lot more about it. If you have a giving history with us, you're going to be getting stuff in the mail about it as well. Just kind of priming the pump for you to be able to be thinking about these things, praying about these things, discussing them with other people in your family so you can think about how to make those decisions. Then next week, next Sunday, immediately after worship, this is connected to becoming a partner, we are having a meeting, a gathering of some sort, for us to be able to discuss what does it look like for us as the Grove Cottage Grove. What is it going to require of us to continue to build the capacity to expand our table? We say that this is a partner gathering because our partners are people who say this is our church home, okay? Anyone is welcome to this gathering, however. It's just, if you're not yet a partner, it might feel a little bit like sitting in on a family conversation where you don't know all of the ins and outs, okay? That is completely understandable. That is completely okay. It might also be an opportunity for you to say, you know what? I do consider this my church home, and I want to take the next step of becoming a partner. So again, that gathering is happening next Sunday, immediately after worship. We're going to have food available. I know there's a Vikings game at noon. You'll be fine. They're probably going to lose anyways.
Truth.
If they don't lose, they're going to come back in the fourth quarter, and you'll be able to go home and watch that, right? That's the exciting part of the Vikings, right? We will be respectful of your time, discuss what we need to discuss together as a church family, and then get you out for the rest of your Sunday. Again, if you're not yet a partner and this is like your prompt to take that next step, you can go to that link, scan that QR code, or just talk to me after the worship service, and we can figure out how to help you take those next steps. Last thing, Pop-Up Pumpkin Patch is 4 weeks from yesterday. Biggest event of the year. This is an opportunity for us to create a gathering in the community that is outside of our church walls. It's not a big churchy event. It is a fun fall event for thousands of people to show up for. The current RSVPs on Facebook are 3,000. We probably won't have 3,000, but we're going to have a lot of people. So we are continuing to look for volunteers to be able to help with that. If you are willing to volunteer in any capacity to help pull that event off, you can go to that link or scan that QR code. Also, if you're really well connected with other people who might be interested in sponsoring even to help us to make this event happen, you can connect with me after the service. You had something you talked to me about in the middle of the week that said, can we moving stuff? Are you still planning on doing that today?
I'm so glad you remembered that. Okay, if you don't know, there's a big upstairs storage space in this church. Half of it is used for kids' stuff, which is amazing, and then the other half is like all of my stuff that I have needed to organize for months for worship and hospitality. I cannot move all of the things down the stairs by myself. It would take me all day. If there's a few of you that are willing to lend 10 minutes after worship to just help me, like Marie Kondo style, we're just going to clean out my half of the space, and then this week I'm going to be able to go through it and reorganize it so that this is a more functional space for our entire church. If anybody is willing to stay and help me, I would so appreciate it, because my staff counterparts have been waiting for me to finish this job for many months. So if you're willing to stay, come find me afterwards, and we'll just unload it.
All right. The nice thing too is we've got fresh coffee. We've got an open space for you to linger, even if you're not able or willing to help with bringing stuff down. Please spend time connecting with one another, just enjoying each other's presence on this beautiful day. With that, I will now invite you to stand back up as you are able and extend your hands to receive this blessing. Once again, may we be people who dig into the back of our closets to drag out those leaves in order to extend our tables. And may we do so in order to make room for and to invite anyone and everyone, expecting nothing in return, but knowing and trusting that we'll be blessed as a result. May that be so.
Come gather round the mystery of love in our broken history. where grace heals the fault lines in me time and time again. It welcomes me into our house for the hungry, a well for the thirsty, where all saints come together, shoulder to shoulder, a welcome for the traveler, new wine for the